The valet refused to take my car. He looked at the rust around the wheel wells, then at my faded jacket. Finally, he smiled without smiling. Service entrance is around back. I almost corrected him. Then I noticed my daughter watching from the restaurant steps. She didn't wave. She didn't call my name. She hurried toward me instead. Not to welcome me, to stop me. My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 70 years old. For most of my life, I built emergency communication systems, not cell towers, not internet companies, the invisible backup networks hospitals, airports, and city emergency services depended on when everything else failed. If a hurricane knocked out the power, my systems still worked. If a wildfire destroyed phone lines, my systems still worked. Nobody noticed them. Until the day they were needed. That suited me perfectly. I never liked applause. After retirement, I sold the company. Not publicly, quickly. Only a handful of people knew the final number. My daughter wasn't one of them. She never asked. She simply assumed. I'd become another retired old man living carefully on a pension. I never corrected her. Emily had always chased appearances. The newest neighborhood, the right schools, the right clothes, the right friends. Not because she was cruel, because she believed respect could be purchased. Somewhere along the way, she stopped noticing the difference. When she earned a promotion to regional vice president, she insisted on celebrating at the most exclusive restaurant in the city. Reservations booked months in advance, private dining room, company executives, investors, local politicians. She called me herself. Dad, it would mean a lot if you came. I believed her, so I put on my best suit, the one I'd worn to my wife's funeral. It still fit, mostly. Before I reached the entrance, Emily intercepted me. Her smile never reached her eyes. Dad, I need a favor. Of course. She glanced toward the restaurant windows. My boss is here, so, she lowered her voice. Your car, what about it? It looks, she searched for a kinder word, old. I suppose it does. And your jacket, it's the nicest one I own. She sighed. Then came the sentence I'll never forget. Would you mind staying in the car? I blinked. What? I'll bring you a plate. You can eat afterward. She looked over her shoulder to make sure nobody was listening, then whispered, stay in the car and eat the leftovers like a good beggar. For several seconds, the city seemed to disappear. No traffic, no voices. Just that sentence, like someone had struck a bell inside my chest. I looked past her, through the restaurant windows. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, people laughing. Someone had saved a seat with my name card, right beside Emily. She noticed where I was looking, quickly removed the card, folded it, slipped it into her purse. I'll explain later. No, you already have. I nodded once. Walked back toward my car, not because she ordered me, because I suddenly wanted to see how long the performance would last. I sat behind the steering wheel. The restaurant overlooked the harbor. From where I parked, I could see almost every table through the glass, waiters carrying wine, champagne, toasts. Emily smiling for photographs. Perfect, everything looked perfect. Then, my dashboard phone rang, not my cell phone. The secure satellite phone mounted beneath the dashboard. It hadn't rung in almost 4 years. Only 3 people in the country still had that number. I answered immediately. Harold Bennett. A familiar voice spoke without introduction. Mr. Bennett, this is Admiral Thomas Keegan. We have a national communications failure. He paused. You're the only person who knows where the original emergency override architecture is. I looked through the restaurant window. Emily was raising a champagne glass. Everyone stood to applaud her. The Admiral continued. We've got less than 20 minutes. Can you help us? I quietly started the engine, because somewhere inside that beautiful restaurant, my daughter still believed the most important person that evening was sitting at her table. She was about to discover he had been sitting in the parking lot all along. I didn't drive to Washington. I drove 3 miles to Warehouse 18, an ordinary concrete building near the old freight docks. No company logo, no sign, just faded gray walls and a rusted security gate. The Admiral wasn't calling because I was brilliant. He was calling because I was stubborn. 28 years earlier, Congress had ordered a nationwide emergency communications backup. Every contractor wanted cloud servers, satellite redundancy, digital automation. I wanted something else: paper, steel, mechanical switches. People laughed until I asked one question. What happens if the software fails? Nobody answered, so I built one system. That didn't need software. The guard at Warehouse 18 recognized me immediately. He hadn't changed. Neither had his habit of saluting before speaking. "Good evening, Mr. Bennett. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "So do I." He unlocked the gate. Inside, everything looked exactly as I'd left it. Rows of steel cabinets, analog control panels, maps covering entire walls, emergency radios older than most engineers still working today. People called it outdated, until today. 3 technicians were already waiting, none older than 30. One looked nervous. "Sir, we've tried everything. I know, you know," I smiled. "That's why they finally called me." The National Emergency Network hadn't failed. The automatic recovery software had. Thousands of digital systems, each waiting for another system to restart first. An endless loop, modern, sophisticated, completely useless. I walked past 6 computer racks, ignored every blinking screen, stopped in front of an old steel cabinet painted military green. The youngest technician frowned. "That thing still works?" "It works because nobody ever asked it to be clever." I inserted a brass key, turned it, pulled one heavy lever. The entire room fell silent. 5 seconds later, the first green light appeared, then another, then another. One technician whispered, "No way." Communication routes began restoring themselves. Hospitals, emergency dispatch, air traffic backups, regional command centers, one by one. Exactly as designed, 23 years earlier. My secure phone rang again. The Admiral. "Harold, we're seeing systems come back online." "I know. How?" "You remembered where you left the spare key." He laughed for the first time all evening. "I owe you. You owe me nothing. You saved us." "No, I saved paperwork." He laughed again. "You never change." I tried retirement. It didn't suit me. As I hung up, one of the technicians looked embarrassed. "I've read about you. I thought those stories were exaggerated." "They usually are." "No, they weren't." He looked around the warehouse. "Why didn't anyone know this place existed?" I answered honestly. "Because emergency systems aren't built for attention. They're built for the day attention disappears." Across town, Emily's celebration was reaching its peak. Her company's CEO had just stood to announce her promotion officially. Champagne glasses filled. Everyone raised them then. Every phone in the private dining room vibrated at once. Not messages, baliti alerts, government notifications, breaking news, a nationwide communications emergency. Every executive reached for their screen. The CEO frowned, then suddenly looked around the room. "Does anyone here know Harold Bennett?" Emily smiled proudly. "My father." The CEO stared at her. "Your father?" "Yes, he couldn't make dinner." The CEO slowly lowered his phone. "No, he just made every news channel in the country." The room went completely silent. Meanwhile, Warehouse 18's old landline rang. Not the secure phone, the ordinary office phone, I answered. "Warehouse 18. The woman on the other end sounded flustered. "Mr. Bennett?" "Yes, this is Le Jardin, the harbor restaurant." I recognized the name immediately. "We're terribly sorry to disturb you, but several government vehicles have just arrived. They're asking where you've been seated." I looked at the dusty warehouse, then at the old station clock hanging above the doorway. I wasn't seated. A pause. "They're requesting your presence immediately." I smiled gently. I'm already exactly where I was needed. And somewhere inside that glittering restaurant, my daughter was beginning to understand the difference between someone who looks important and someone the country actually calls when everything stops working. The government convoy reached the restaurant before the news cameras did. 6 black SUVs, no sirens, no flashing lights, just quiet urgency. People dining on the terrace stopped eating. Valet stepped aside. Restaurant staff rushed toward the entrance. Nobody knew who they were waiting for, except one person, Emily. She assumed they were there because of her company's political connections. She straightened her blazer, smoothed her hair, practiced the smile she'd used all evening. The maitre d' hurried over. "Mrs. Bennett, they're asking for someone." She smiled confidently. "I'll handle it." She walked toward the entrance. An Air Force colonel stepped forward. "Ma'am, are you Harold Bennett?" Her smile froze. "No, I'm his daughter." The colonel nodded politely. "Where is he?" She pointed toward the private dining room. He stepped out. The colonel glanced behind him, then spoke quietly into his radio. "Subject not on site." The words echoed louder than any announcement. Inside the dining room, every executive had already seen the breaking news. Television screens above the bar displayed the same headline: Retired communications engineer restores national emergency network. The anchor continued. Officials have confirmed that retired systems architect Harold Bennett activated the only remaining analog override capable of restoring emergency communications. The CEO slowly looked toward Emily. Your father built that? She swallowed. I didn't know. He didn't answer because he wasn't listening anymore. His attention had shifted to the restaurant entrance. Another convoy arrived, this one smaller, no politicians, just engineers. Gray-haired men and women carrying old identification badges. One recognized the restaurant immediately. This is where Harold was having dinner. The hostess looked uncomfortable. He never came inside. What do you mean? She hesitated, then quietly answered. He stayed in the parking lot. Nobody asked why. Not yet. Meanwhile, I was sitting on an old wooden crate inside Warehouse 18 drinking terrible vending machine coffee. One of the young technicians laughed. I think every television station in America is looking for you. They'll get over it. No, I don't think they will. He handed me his phone. Live helicopters circled the restaurant. Reporters interviewed government officials outside. Everyone wanted the same story. Where was Harold Bennett? Nobody imagined. The man they were chasing preferred instant coffee in an abandoned warehouse. The phone rang again, this time. It wasn't the Admiral. It was the restaurant. Again, the manager sounded desperate. Mr. Bennett, I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. I do. My staff informed me your daughter asked you to remain outside. I said nothing. He continued. I've been in hospitality for 31 years. I've seen difficult families. I've never seen. He stopped himself, then quietly asked, would you allow us to bring tonight's dinner to the warehouse? I almost laughed. No, we already ate. One technician lifted his vending machine sandwich. We're doing just fine. Across town. Emily wasn't. She'd spent the last hour answering the same question. Why wasn't your father at your table? Every version of her answer sounded worse than the previous one. Finally, someone who had been standing near the valet quietly spoke. I know. The room turned toward him. He was the young valet, the same one who had mistaken me for someone using the service entrance. He looked embarrassed. I watched her stop him before he reached the door. I heard. He hesitated, then finished. She told him to stay in the car. Silence, crushing, nobody spoke, because nobody needed details anymore. The truth had arrived. Without me saying a single word, the CEO slowly removed his company badge from around his neck. Not angrily, just thoughtfully. Then he looked at Emily. The biggest promotion of your career, and the only person you were ashamed to introduce, was the man the entire country was trying to thank tonight. He picked up his coat. So I think we're finished here. One by one, every guest stood, not dramatically, not shouting, just leaving. Within 4 minutes, the private dining room that had taken 6 months to reserve was almost completely empty. Only untouched desserts remained on the table. And Emily, still standing beside the chair she'd never allowed her father to sit in. Emily came to the warehouse the next morning, not with flowers, not with an apology, with a photographer. I saw the camera before I saw her. She stepped out of her car wearing yesterday's business suit. The photographer followed, carrying 2 lenses. I walked outside. She smiled nervously. Dad, I've been thinking. I imagine you have. She glanced toward the photographer. I thought, maybe we could take a picture together. I looked at the photographer, then back at her. Why? She hesitated. The company posted about you, my promotion announcement. Well, it disappeared. Instead, every company page now featured the emergency communications story. My name, not hers. Her smile weakened. I just thought, people should know we're family. For several seconds, I simply looked at her. Then I asked, were we family yesterday? The photographer quietly lowered his camera. He suddenly wished he were somewhere else. No, I said gently. Today isn't for photographs. She dismissed the photographer. He nodded gratefully and left without taking a single picture. Only then did she finally stop performing. I was embarrassed. I know. I kept thinking successful people looked a certain way. She looked toward my old sedan parked beside the warehouse. I spent years trying to impress strangers, and yesterday, I humiliated the only person who never asked me to impress him. I didn't interrupt because for the first time, she wasn't speaking to protect herself. She was speaking to understand herself. A week later, the station officially reopened, not as a museum, not as a tourist attraction, as the Bennett Center for Emergency Communication and Public Service. High school students learned disaster communications, volunteer firefighters trained there, retired engineers mentored apprentices. Everything was free, funded permanently. No admission tickets, no VIP memberships, no family ownership, just public service, exactly as it should be. Before the ribbon cutting, the mayor asked me a question. "Mr. Bennett, we'd like to name the main hall after you." I smiled. "No, then after your father?" "No." He looked confused. "Why not?" I pointed toward the entrance. People were already arriving. Teachers, paramedics, electricians, railway workers, young students, old veterans. The building doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to everyone who shows up when everyone else runs away. He nodded. "I understand." And he changed the plaque. It simply read, "For those who answer the call." That afternoon, Emily quietly walked through the workshops. Nobody recognized her. Nobody cared about her title. A 14-year-old student asked if she could help organize emergency supply kits. She spent 3 hours filling backpacks with flashlights, radios, batteries, and medical supplies. Nobody thanked her, nobody applauded, because volunteering isn't a performance, it's a habit. When she finished, she walked over to me. "My promotion dinner. I thought it would be the biggest night of my life." "And?" She smiled sadly. "It lasted 3 hours." She looked around the center. "This will still matter after I'm gone." I placed one hand on her shoulder. "Now you're finally being promoted." She frowned. "I already was." I shook my head. "No, you got a better office. Today, you became a better human being." Every year, on the anniversary of the communications blackout, students gather beneath the restored station clock, not to celebrate me, to practice emergency response drills. Every exercise begins with the same sentence carved into a bronze wall. Status means nothing when the lights go out. Character is the only system that never fails. Visitors often ask why an old sedan is displayed near the entrance. The guides smile. That's where the founder was sitting when the country called. Most never hear another story. The story of a promotion dinner, a parking lot, or a daughter who confused success with appearance. Because those things stopped mattering, the only story worth remembering was what one ordinary man chose to do. After someone told him to stay in the car,